I don't think politicians are aware of just what does go on in some of our rural areas.
There are a lot of people now moving into the countryside and are overwhelming the infrastructure.
I think there needs to be some education in the government that the ordinary people that's always lived and worked in the countryside are not a wealthy batch of hooray Henrys, because they're not.
And the red brick cottage where I was born is the empty shell of a holiday home. Most of the year there's no one there. The village is dead and they don't care. Now we live on the edge of town. I've been back since the pub closed down. One man's family pays the price for another man's vision of country life.
But we do tend to feel like we've been forgotten about out here. We have sort of, you exist as a picture postcard and nothing else.
Most of the homes in this marketplace are second homes and holiday cottages, so they're empty and shut up.
Youngsters can't even afford to live around here. They all end up moving to Lowestoft and coming back here to work. Because a lot of my friends have just done it now, but they've all had to get mortgages and things and live out there and leave all their families behind.
People who are fairly affluent can afford to come and buy here, which means that you can be paying a six-figure sum and several six figures for a two-bedroom house, for a former council house, that sort of thing, up to $250,000 for something of that nature. Now that just means that a local young family or young person hasn't got a hope in the housing market.
40 years ago there were 4 or 5 butcher's shops in Petworth. A year ago we lost the last one. Fortunately now we have another butcher's shop returned, but in that interim period there's been a gradual decline in many of the services on that sort of scale.
So I suppose everybody nowadays goes to supermarkets. There were 8 shops in Peakdale at one time. 8 shops. And they've gone a Co-op, something else, Chipper, something else. They've all gone. This will be the next go, this post office.
You're just limited to the one grocery shop with the Happy Shopper products and vegetables that's been there for the week that have seen better life, really.
Using the local co-op and local shops, it's probably an ideal way to shop local produce, but it's so expensive and I just really can't afford it. It's not something, so I'm having to rely on the generosity of friends.
People don't bring the money into the village when they come to the holiday cottage. You take your supermarket shop with you and pile it into the holiday cottage. That's not brought any money into the village.
When you can pay a limited amount at this post office, rest of banks, and you have to go up, are you with me, to pay them? Or if you pay them through here, they charge you fee about £3 for something.
People don't necessarily have access to get into larger towns that are further away. One of the options that can be used to overcome this is credit unions, which are a not-for-profit organisation, and they give people the opportunity to save, and after they've saved for a certain period of time they can then apply for small loans which are charged at a very, very low interest rate. Again, it has the issue of bringing communities together, and they can actually take ownership of it and run it themselves, and that's an important part of it, and combined with debt advice and various other services that can be taken out to rural communities on a relatively regular basis, then that can make quite a big difference to people in rural communities. And we've set up what we call the Good Food Co-op, which is basically a vegetable bag scheme. We get our produce from local suppliers and we put in a bulk order, and then we take it to a village hall or a community centre or a church hall. There's other benefits as well, that the farmers are actually getting good value for their produce, which on occasion doesn't happen when they're selling to supermarkets, so there's that benefit as well. And it is local, people know where it's come from.
There's very, very little public transport. We're lucky we've got a bus every hour to Sheffield, but that can't get you to Sheffield in order to start a job properly, and can't bring you back. So it's a lot of added travelling time.
They've got no buggy-friendly bus service around here at all, neither, and my sister struggles with 2 children. She's pregnant with her third to get on the bus and fold up all the buggies and get the children on the bus.
There was 2 buses one on a Tuesday at 11:10 and come back at 1:30. Then there was one on a Friday at the same time. So you couldn't get from A to B if you couldn't drive.
Why did you need the car?
Because it's easy to get out places. You know,
and do shopping.
Hospital and that, instead of trying to go on a bus with 6 bags. Because he can't carry much.
Because I've got arthritis.
You see, we have to shop at one go here. You don't know if you're going to be cut off with snow or out.
Problems escalate. One problem leads to another. The issue of transport, which is very important because particularly has medical needs, they have to get out. They thought, okay, have a little bit of money because of a benefit. I helped them get a disability benefit with a back payment. Quite reasonably thought, well, I'll buy a car, it will make things easier. But it turns out that he couldn't afford to run the car, and so he got into debt to try and service the car. Eventually he said, enough is enough, and I'll get rid of the car, but he's still left with the debts.
I think that living in the sticks does have its problems. It requires far more planning of your time and your day, even to planning your whole week out, so that if you're not going to rely entirely on the car, you've got to have your buses worked out and the time you're going to spend in such places as Norwich.
There's a community bus that takes the older people to Glossop on a Friday, and they do go to the market first, cup of tea in the community centre, and then take them up to the big Tesco's. But obviously they're limited to what they can carry, and the bus drivers do help and unload at the back at the houses, and their individual pickups as well. So that helps, but only if you're a certain age. If you're younger, you can't obviously do that.
Governments are aware that that there is racism across the country, but I think that awareness is more focused on urban areas where you have larger, minority ethnic populations.
I think a lot of the time it's fear of the unknown, especially amongst the older generation, but amongst the younger generation it's the fact that there's not enough education to do with diversity in schools. And if you're in a rural area, my son was the only black child in the school, so he was an obvious target for bullying.
She reported racism is actually serious more than she talked about. She has arson. People set arson outside the dustbin, and in about middle of the night, about 12 o'clock nighttime, that time she couldn't sleep.
The bottom line is, in places like this, there's no work, or what work there is, you aren't sufficient to do any good with. And, you know, if you're going to go to work from here, you've got to go at least to Kings Lynn, which is 50 mile a day, the round trip, which after a week takes out of what you're going to earn, takes a bit of a knopping.
It costs a ridiculous amount of money to come to work every day.
You could be working for those extra 2-3 hours you're travelling and earning money rather than spending it on the buses.
There are still a lot of people out there who are not aware of the services that are available to them.
Some people can get bus passes, because we're about £5 over this limit. We've got to pay rent.
Council tax.
Council tax, that's for start. Gas, water, electric, you don't get that free, do you? That's it. We can't claim income support eating allowance or out. I'm on DLA for travelling and that, but it's into that. And she gets it.
It made them feel confident, and they started relationships because they just felt so much better about themselves. Yeah. Once you get services in, it really improves people's quality of life tremendously.
And it's a cold place here. I mean, it's all right saying on these weather forecasts you get cold weather payments, but it's where that place is. It's not Peakdale like these hills, is it?
No.
And that's why I disagree with you. Won't come and live here for a week, this Blair and his mates.
Нас поселили в караван, малые караваны, в которых должны были жить 6 человек. 6-5.
In the accommodation, 6 people living in each caravan. And each person will be paid every week £35.
Некоторым студентам не хватало караванов, и они должны были жить в желтых боксах, где не было душа, ничего, одно окно.
Early morning, every day, only one day off, I think. Some days it's manager pay £3 because not so much picking and the fruits. It's impossible.
A lot more farmers are getting lonelier. There are fewer farmers about. Not so many people calling on the farms for the farmer to talk to. And half the time he's only got his wife to talk to, and sometimes that's a disadvantage.
And neither of my children are connected to farming at all, really. Daughter does a bit of office work for us, but my son's gone away into engineering. And that's an end of many years of a family that's been in farming, really.
We run a farm shop here alongside with farming. Gradually, I think the farm shop is taking over the farming side because that is the side that pays. We now do the veg that go off to the box scheme that goes into town, and we're very pleased to be supplying for that. They come and put in a bulk order and I send it off and they then distribute it, so that's working very nicely.
There is nothing.
People laying about, but they've got nothing to do and they just want somewhere to meet up and go somewhere. And in the towns you've got a lot of facilities like your ice skating rinks, swimming pools and all your other things. Not in the rural areas. I think they're lacking. They need support.
So we can't all just walk every day, get a bit boring.
It's boring. I don't like it anymore. I'm used to it, so I just want to live in the city, really.
Boredom is a huge thing, and lack of funds, lack of money, but to be able to afford to go elsewhere.
The nearest youth centre is in Hathersage, but they've just shut that down recently, so you can't go to that. And to go to town, you have to have quite a bit of money to go every night, and you have to have your parents say you can go. And then you have kids going out drinking because they've got nothing else to do, and you get in trouble for it.
Go to the bus stop, 3 litre bottle of cider, pack of 10, you're away. Separate night then.
I went outside and talked to the young people who were lurking in the bus stop and asked them what they would like to have happening. And they told me they'd like to do hip-hop dancing, so that's what they had.
We're much more vulnerable. And I think we have a greater fear. The fear of the unknown, because we haven't got anybody to talk to discuss it with.
Yeah, in my view, it is the elderly that are the most vulnerable, regardless of their backgrounds. If we mention, for instance, she's a well-spoken, well-educated lady. She's had several problems over the recent years, and if she finds herself vulnerable and it's difficult to get her way out of these problems, then those less able are certainly got a problem.
There is increasing isolation, particularly amongst the elderly. Even in the last 20 years, I've noticed that we haven't got a village shop any longer. You have to go further for things. And particularly in this village, we've got several elderly people who, once they get things like cataracts and they can't drive their car and their license is taken away from them, they're totally dependent on other people.
If you come out of school from sixth form, or even if you want to go to college, you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go there.
It just makes that little bit extra effort for a young person who needs to access a college, which is, as I said, 20 miles away. Either way, there's two different directions. We have a train service, which again is 5 miles from here, and a bus service that isn't regular.
Children on the buses travelling 15 or more miles to school in the morning, and then go home again during the afternoon. And yet we're only an hour and a half from London.
To gain access, for example, to a college of further education where you can do qualifications and so forth, you need to have access to transport. So it immediately ties up with access to transport, how often do buses run, and all those sorts of things. There are some very good local initiatives, and it's interesting to see how similar it is to inner city communities, for example, to help people gain access to IT skills and those sorts of things. And there are some wonderful little community organisations who are trying to enable village halls and other places like that to be used to give people access to these skills.
A group came in and they decided that they would make the parish hall into an IT centre. And I remember thinking at the time, you must be daft, you know, who's going to do that? Who's going to be interested? And in fact, it's taken off. It's fantastic.
There are not that many centres like this around, and we've brought the training to the community. So people who would not normally travel to Ipswich or Norwich for training, it's here on the doorstep.
Since I've had my computer, I have run a business with my husband, and I now do all the accounts on the computer. Before, I just had a red ledger book. Now I've learned how to do all the accounts, and we now employ 10 people in our company, which we couldn't do before.
I've got to get from Banksworth to Bluefield, and I have to have one of my daughters take me there, because I'm in a wheelchair, see. Because you don't bother the doctor to come out, do you?
No, the doctors don't
If
come
not,
out.
you've got to wait a long while for them.
Life is getting more and more difficult as time goes on. I note from year to year a reduction in the small amount of sight that I have left. Eventually I will be totally blind. I'm very fortunate. My wife is fit and she takes me around in the car, and this is really good, but there are plenty of people around here who don't have that advantage, and there are a lot of blind people in West Sussex.
Because we support nearly 5,000 blind and partially sighted people, most of them actually are elderly and have other disabilities and complex health issues, and wherever they live, we are finding that it's difficult for them to travel in order to access mainstream forms of support. So just getting to the GP surgery, getting to talk to someone about healthcare, about housing, about benefits, advocacy, guidance, support, education and so on, they're having to make at least 2 journeys, either a train followed by a bus or a good walking distance as well, which for someone who is blind and elderly and disabled is extremely difficult.
If you didn't have a car, you'd have to get one from somewhere, or a taxi, which is terrific. You know, and when you get older, you seem to use those places more.
A lot of people can't afford taxi fares. There is a community bus which runs 2 or 3 times a week, run of course by volunteers, and indeed if we didn't have volunteers around the place, everybody would fold their tents and go away.
I find it easier to come here, chat to someone, like if there's minor, than to go there to the doctors, really.
And also as well, would you have to ask your mum to take you to the doctors, or can you get there okay? Because that's quite, like you say, it's about 10 minutes away. Would you have to ask your mum to give you a lift there?
Yeah, I would have to ask my mum, and if I didn't want her to, like, you know about it, if I was shy or whatever, then I prefer to just come here, because it's like, easily available to get here as well.
We do a lot of work here in collaboration with the schools in terms of the child and adolescent mental health services. You know, they really work with the severe end of the young people who have mental health problems, i.e. suicide, self-harm, extreme sort of behaviours. But, you know, we're trying to address that that beginning stage, preventative work. So we're going into schools trying to catch the young person that's showing signs of depression, you know, early. We try and do a lot of work in schools in groups group work, looking at self-confidence, managing situations that at home might be very difficult. Social service is very stretched down here again. So again we work very closely with them. Again, trying to do preventative work.
Problems don't stop when you're at school. There's lots of things after that happens outside of school, and in the summer holidays, and and obviously as well when you leave school, or if you have problems at school, you don't feel like you can go to people at school. So you need somewhere that's completely different and completely separate from that.
Well, because I thought I had a problem anyway, to say it politely, us, the sex nurse, instead of going to the doctors, because I feel more comfortable in this sort of environment talking about stuff like that. And like at the doctors, if it's only something small, I don't really want to bother them, but it still worries me.
Most of the official indices of deprivation seem not to measure rural deprivation in an accurate kind of way. It's hidden.